Welcome to Against the Spread, where we pick NFL games for you against the spread, and we're doing a really good job this year. So not to pat ourselves on the back too soon because it's still early, but our survivors worked out, Gilo, so I think they should be listening to exactly what we say on all these picks.
Yeah, and maybe more so to you than me, because the last couple of weeks I've taken a bit of a beating. When we picked different, you were winning all the games, and now you're 20 above 500. So pat yourself on the back. I got some making up to do.
Well, it's the long game. There's lots and lots of times. And we'll see how different we are this week because there's some more big lines, which makes people uncomfortable. We'll start with something that's pretty small. Atlanta goes to Carolina. The line is -3. And one of my mistakes was I was all in on the Falcons last week, and Todd Gurley didn't do me any favors. Who do you like in this matchup?
It's remarkable how the Falcons, even without Dan Quinn, continue to find new and creative ways to lose football games. The game-losing touchdown is something I never thought that I would see in this world, but here we are, 2020 once again delivering. In terms of this game, I think it's pretty clear who the better team is here. The Panthers did just lose to the Saints, but they kept it really tight in that game. They were able to score at will, and I just don't like the Falcons at this point in time. That their defense is a mess, and who knows what's going on with the offense, especially with the NFL trade deadline coming up. So I'm going to take the Panthers at home with a relatively small spread.
Yeah, I'm actually really surprised this spread is this small, considering there is some talk CMC might be back as early as this week. We're taping this, full disclosure, on Tuesday, so we'll see. But even without him, the Panthers have been good enough offensively that 3 points is clearly enough for me to feel comfortable, and I'll take Carolina in this one. Another game that's really close, and it's involved the other team that found a way to win against Atlanta and didn't find a way to lose once again. The Detroit Lions are hosting the Colts. Again, a tight line, and I'm somewhat surprised given the discrepancy in the records in these two teams. Detroit is only an underdog by 2.5 points at home. Are you going with Indy?
I think I'm going to go with Indy, yeah. And I think the main reason is because of what we saw from them right before the bye. And that was a comeback from 21 points down. I mean, you can't ignore the fact they were 21 points down to the Bengals, but they did in 3 quarters of that game against the Bengals come back and really perform well, especially on offense, which we hadn't really seen yet from the Colts. It looked like Phillip Rivers is finally on the same page with Frank Reich. And the defense is good. That we know that about the Colts. And like you said about the Lions, they're an okay team, but really they got lucky against the Falcons, and they were so close to losing to that one-win Falcons team that we were just saying is a disaster. So again, it's a close spread, and one that I didn't really think about when I saw this game. I would take the Colts all day here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Lions get a bit of a bump because they're at home, but who cares about that in this year specifically? Yeah. And you look at the records; they seem relatively tight. Indy 4-2, Detroit 3-3, but the difference in schedules they played, and the fact that the Colts basically, laid an egg week 1 and have been 4-1 since. Indy clearly the better team, so yes, I think they could win by more than a field goal in this one. Minnesota, I'm not really sure how many teams other than the Jets I can say they are better than. They go to Green Bay, and they are 7-point underdogs in division matchups, so you have to weigh that, but I don't really think this is much of a question. Do you?
It's pretty shocking that we'd put the Jets and the Vikings in the same conversation. I mean, if we had said that at the beginning of the season, it would have been laughable, but here we are. I still have some reservations about the Packers, given how badly they were beaten down by the Buccaneers a couple weeks ago. But the one thing that they have shown that they do really well is feast on bad defenses. And that's exactly what the Vikings have. They rank 28th in yards allowed, 29th in passing yards allowed, which, Aaron Rodgers must be drooling at that prospect. And they're 30th in points against. So, yeah, this being a division clash gives me a bit of pause at this spread, but I'm going to take it. I'm not going to overthink this one. I think the Packers can win this one pretty handily.
Yeah, and that bad defense gets worse. Is to me their best player on defense, maybe their best player on the field, the lone bright spot, Yannick Ngakoue. They traded to what's wrong with my brain?
The Ravens.
To the Ravens. So the rich get richer in that case. And the fire sale may be starting to happen in Minnesota. So I do like Green Bay in this one. Speaking of the other team that I suppose is giving them a run for their money in terms of the worst in the NFL. And quite frankly, I think they are the worst and will win the lose for Lawrence or tank for Trevor sweepstakes. The New York Jets, who are bad, but are they 19.5-point underdogs against the defending champion Kansas City Chiefs in Kansas City? Are they that bad? Like that's basically an SEC versus a Division I AA school spread. Are you willing to go to 20 in terms of how much the Chiefs need to win by?
This is a mind-boggling thing for me because you want to take 99.9% of the time, you want to take the Chiefs over the Jets. I think that part of it is a no-brainer, and in no way do I think this is a competitive matchup, but 20 points is a huge spread. So many things can happen in a football game that could ruin this for someone who takes the Chiefs. So with my mind being rattled a bit by this, I did a little bit of research, and there have been 13 games where teams have been underdogs by 20 points. And in those games, the underdogs are 10-3. So that was enough for me to be convinced that I'm going to take the Jets here. There's just too much that could happen in a game like this that could get that within 20. So I am taking the Jets, I think, for the first time this year.
Yeah, it's probably a smart play, but I'm going to go the other way. I look at the narrative, and you got Le'Veon Bell coming home in a somewhat, I suppose, Le'Veon Bell revenge game, although you should be happy. You should hug everybody on the Jets sideline that they were willing to let him walk. The Chiefs coming off a game where they scored in all three phases. I'm not sure there are three players on the Jets team that you'd pick to score in a fantasy league. I do think that the Chiefs could blow this one out. Is it smart money? No. Should you place a bet for the Chiefs to cover the spread? No. But will I enjoy watching and hoping that they win by 21? I certainly will. And so I'm going to roll with the Chiefs, even though it's probably not wise. Now, this one is tough to handicap because normally I would come on here and I'd say, well, Cleveland, they played well, got a nice win, but they're without their best player on offense, certainly, in Odell Beckham Jr., done for the year with the ACL injury. And so 2.5 points, maybe I'll lean with the Raiders, who have looked pretty good. But Baker Mayfield has been somewhat better without Odell Beckham Jr. How do you factor in that injury into where you're leading in this game and this line?
Well, I think ultimately the Browns are a worse team without Odell Beckham Jr. I think that's pretty hard to deny. But I mean, what we saw from Baker is also pretty hard to deny. But that's kind of the reason why I was leaning Raiders here initially, was because Mayfield is not going to be able to do what he did on Sunday again. He can't replicate the kind of efficiency that he had in the last three quarters of that game. But then I was reminded that the Raiders' offensive line is dealing with some COVID troubles, and they didn't practice last week. They all missed the game. And that could happen again. And I think what could end up deciding this game, despite the fact that these are two really bad defenses, is Myles Garrett. I think Myles Garrett is probably the defensive player of the year at this point in time. And if he's able to take advantage of a weary Raiders offensive line and get after Derek Carr, I think he can change this game in multiple ways. So I'm going to take the Browns at home with a relatively small spread, but I do expect this game to be high scoring. And my advice would be take the over. I think it's 54, and these teams give up tons of points.
Yeah, I don't think, in the aggregate, the Browns are happy that Odell Beckham Jr. is there, or much better without him. But Baker is better as a quarterback when you look at, the last 2 years. Every metric in terms of when Odell is on and off the field, Baker improves. And really, he improves throwing to every other receiver other than Odell Beckham Jr. So he's 0 for 5 last week. And then after Odell gets hurt, he's 22 of 23. And the only incompletion was a spiked football for whatever reason, not because Odell's a cancer, but because Baker actually decides to read the entire football field, he's better, and thus they're better. I think your point about Myles Garrett is correct. I see him having a monster day, and so 2.5 points with Cleveland, I'll definitely take that. Now, a guy who could be giving Myles Garrett a run for Defensive Player of the Year if his defense wasn't as solid as it is around him, and if it wasn't a race to the quarterback in terms of him getting there before the other defensive end on his team, is T.J. Watt, who has been a game wrecker. But despite that, and despite the fact that the Pittsburgh Steelers are still undefeated, they're underdogs going to Baltimore, who are coming off a bye and are the favorites by 3.5 points. This line started at Baltimore -6. It's now down to 3.5 points. Are you surprised how it started early, and are you comfortable with where it is now?
Yeah, I'm really surprised that it was, this is the lone undefeated team in the NFL. And in my opinion, the most balanced and probably the best team in the NFL right now. Sure, they're going on the road against, the defending division champ, but the Steelers are a legit team right now. And I'm surprised this is any bigger than a field goal for the Ravens. I expected the Ravens to be favored, but I didn't expect it to be even as big as it is right now. So in my opinion, this is an easy pick. I'm going to take the Steelers. Aside from the fact that I think they're the best team in the NFL, I also know that there's a history of AFC North teams deciding these division games by a field goal. It happens all the time. It's one of the more predictable division outcomes there is. So I didn't think twice about this. I'm taking the Steelers.
I mean, I thought twice about it. I probably thought 22 times about it. And eventually at the point where I'm going to take the Ravens. I don't feel great about it.
Wow.
Baked in my thought process is just they're coming off a bye. They were banged up in terms of their offensive line, and that really impacted the run game. Assuming that gets better, and on a bye you do an appraisal of your team and what you need to do moving forward. And I think giving J.K. Dobbins a mini training camp over the week, maybe we see him more in that offense and it becomes more explosive. And I also just feel like Pittsburgh, they're starting to get a bit more healthy at the wide receiver position, but as a whole, their team is somewhat banged up. And remember, their bye was forced upon them earlier in the year thanks to the Tennessee Titans. And so I think Baltimore ends up winning this because they're the rested football team and the team that's prepared, where Pittsburgh just had a really hard-fought game against those said Titans. And so I'm leading with Baltimore in this one. Speaking of the Titans, they go on the road, no longer undefeated, but still a favorite, -6, as they go against a Cincinnati Bengals team that is no longer winless. Who do you like in this one?
I think the Titans proved, they had a rough first half against the Steelers, undoubtedly, but I think they proved, to anyone who doubted them, that they are the real deal in that second half, coming back the way they did against the Steelers. And they were just a Gostkowski missed field goal away from tying that game. While I like what Joe Burrow and the future of Cincinnati holds, there's multiple things that I don't like about this team. They can't hold a lead. They turn the ball over a ton. And the run defense is 4th worst in the NFL. And if there's anything that you want to be able to do against the Titans, it's stop the run. So given that the Titans are one of the best teams in the league, the Bengals one of the worst, I like the Titans by a touchdown. I'm willing to take those points.
Yeah, I think this is an easy pick for me as well. The Titans defense has been leaky at times. One thing they do, as you mentioned, is turn you over. And a rookie quarterback against that defense. We saw Ben Roethlisberger in a win struggle in terms of where he's going to fit the football in against this Tennessee defense. It's really what kept Tennessee in the game. And so certainly I think we could see something very similar against Joe Burrow, who's looked great, but he's still a rookie in this one. So I like Tennessee in this matchup. Speaking of rookie QBs, another one gets their debut this season as Tua. It is Tua time in Miami. He's going up against maybe another guy who's in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year, Aaron Donald and the Rams. Maybe even if a corner gets that type of love, Jalen Ramsey, he continues to make splash plays. No matter who you think the best player is on that defense, the Rams are favored by 4 points on the road in Tua's first start. Where are you leaning in this one?
This is going to be really interesting to watch because, like we talked about last week when we heard that Tua was going to get this job, the Dolphins are putting a lot on the line by making this move because they have a chance at an AFC wildcard, or maybe even the division in the AFC East with Fitzpatrick at the helm. So it's going to be a tough start for Tua. Like you said, the Rams defense is really good. Aaron Donald is playing out of his mind, and Jalen Ramsey's playing well. And as we saw on Monday night against the Bears, there's not much offense to be had at this point in time against the Rams. And for it to be the first start of Tua's career, he's in tough. And it's for that reason that I'm going to take the Rams here.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Rams here as well. And I think a lot of it for me has to do with the other quarterback, Jared Goff. 37 wins in his last 4 seasons. That's second most in the league. We forget because kind of considered him a bust early, and then Sean McVay rehabbed his career. But he's playing really, really good football at a high level quietly on that team. And I think the Rams win this, and I think they actually probably win it going away because I don't see Tua, as much arm talent as he has, I don't see him having the ability to sustain drives against that Rams defense. We saw Nick Foles struggle against them on Monday night, and I see similar struggles for Tua. I can only imagine him watching a Monday nighter saying, okay, this is the first NFL defense I get to go against, and wow, what a way I get to start. So we'll see. I could see Ryan Fitzpatrick getting some time in that game because I don't think it's going to be ultimately very close.
That would be a nightmare. That would be a nightmare for the Dolphins.
Well, the reason why when we talked about it last week, that decision is so scrutinized is because the division is up for grabs, and this next game may go a long way in telling who wins that division. The New England Patriots are underdogs going to Buffalo. You heard that correctly. You also heard correctly that they're 2-4 on the year, and 2-4 also against the spread, which is what we care about. And the Bills at home, starting at -3, they're now -4, which is crazy. But it's also crazy that a lot of people were down with it. 71% of the public like the Bills in the spot. Do you think the hoodie and the flamboyantly dressed Cam Newton are going to go into Buffalo and lose by more than 4?
My head tells me no, just because these are the Patriots. These are Bill Belichick's Patriots. And for so long, I've thought it's impossible that they'll lose 3 games in a row, or it's impossible that the defense will be as bad as it has looked. But if we've learned anything from the last game, that beat down at home to the 49ers, it's that these Patriots just aren't the Patriots that we've come to know over the last 20 years. This is the worst Patriots team we've seen in 20 years. The offense hasn't scored more than 12 points in 3 straight games. They've turned the ball over 11 times in those 3 games, and the defense just gave up 470 yards of offense. So I'm going to pick the Bills. Now, I want to say about the Bills, I'm also not convinced about where they are right now because they've only won once in the last 3 games, and it was against the Jets, and they failed to score a touchdown in that game on Sunday. So I'm not really all that convinced by the Bills, but I think what we've seen from the Patriots is enough for me to lean with the favorites at home in Buffalo.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Patriots, and I have been late to the party saying this is the demise of the Patriots dynasty, and I don't think they're going to challenge for a championship, but I can't fathom that in a year with a bit of an extended playoffs, an extra wild card, that somehow they're not going to make the playoffs. But it's getting late early. If they take another L, quite frankly, it's going to be tough for them to make the playoffs. And so I got to think that Belichick is going to figure out a way to win in Buffalo. And so I'll take the 4 points, certainly. And quite frankly, the Bills haven't been looking that great themselves recently, as you mentioned. No team made survivor pick owners sweat more this past week than the Buffalo Bills. And so I'm going to take New England. I'm for one more week. I've been proven wrong for the last couple, but for one more week, I'm going to stay steadfast and say they figure it out in Foxbury. Justin Herbert hasn't figured out. He's playing at an extremely high level, making crazy throws every week. He goes to Denver, where they're still searching for who the heir apparent at quarterback is going to be. Not certain that Drew Lock is that guy just yet. The Chargers are 3-point favorites in this one. Who do you like?
Yeah, I'm going to pick this game just by sharing a couple stats. NFL research says Herbert is the only player since at least 1970 with 1,500 plus pass yards and a 100 plus passer rating over his first 5 career games. The other one, the most touchdowns in the NFL, the most touchdowns on throws of 20 plus yards downfield this season, Russell Wilson, MVP favorite, Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert's playing unreal. He's changed this Chargers offense, regardless of how Anthony Lynn wants to play. This is an explosive offense with him, and I know the Broncos have a really good defense, but I just think that Herbert at this point in time is going to be too much for them to handle. So at this spread, I'll take the Chargers.
Yeah, and we both picked Chargers last week in Survivor, and they kind of made us sweat a little bit. But my brother he was texting me, making fun of me about my Chargers pick. And I just responded to him, Herbert's going to take care of it. Next thing you know, he goes down the field to Guyton. He pulls it himself and runs a touchdown. And then they eventually win comfortably. I will trade your stats for an anecdote. I traded Justin Herbert in a fantasy league that I'm in.
Oh, no.
For Patrick Mahomes. And
really? Wow.
It wasn't straight up. Like, there were other players involved in the deal. I gave up some good players I like Chase Claypool. But ultimately, I'm like, Patrick Mahomes is always going to be a top 5 quarterback. You win this deal. Since I made the trade, Patrick Mahomes has become a game manager, and Justin Herbert has been like the best quarterback in the sport. So, yeah, Herbert has been next level. And so we'll see if he can cover the 3. I certainly think that he can. And so I like him in this spot as well. I mentioned Hall of Fame quarterbacks, becoming game managers, and that's virtually what Drew Brees has done, especially without his big targets in Michael Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders. He's going to have to do it again, potentially, without them as they go to Chicago in an offense that looks like it's really struggling no matter who's playing quarterback. A tough night this week for Nick Foles. Saints are favored by 4. Do you like them?
Obviously, last week when I picked the Bears for the first time this season, it's the first time that they aren't covering. So I'm going back to picking against the Bears. And it's because of that offense. The offense is just anemic. There's just nothing to it. They can't do anything. And I know the Saints defense is not the Rams defense, and the Saints defense has not been playing up to what we thought they were going to be. But the Saints can also score points. And I just don't know where the Bears are going to find those points the way that they're playing right now. So I'll take the Saints, even though, I'm a little hesitant to take the road favorites from that point of view, but I can't pick the Bears again.
Yeah, that Saints defense, they've really struggled against the pass, which we thought coming into this year was going to be a great strength of theirs. The issue in this game is there's no one really offensively on Chicago that is a massive threat through the air, specifically deep down the field, and they've struggled so much to run the ball consistently. Singletary looks to be a fantasy bust. If you have him as an RB2, never mind an RB1. And so with the Saints' ability still to pass rush and be one-dimensional because there isn't much of a run threat, that ability I think is going to help their secondary, and I think their defense will be okay in this matchup because all defenses have been relatively okay against the Chicago Bears. So I like the Saints in this game. Another game that will be impacted based off of the availability of players offensively is the next one. San Francisco goes to Seattle. Seattle favored at home by -3. Deebo Samuel's availability, I think, is a big factor for me. Who do you like in this game?
This is a tough one. You talked about going back and forth on the Ravens and the Steelers. This is the one that I've gone back and forth on, and I've been able to convince myself that both teams are going to win. But in the end, I've settled with the 49ers, and it's not because of the offense. It's because of the defense. The defense has been playing really well over the last 2 games. They smothered the Rams 2 weeks ago, and they just dominated the Patriots like we referred to earlier this past Sunday. They're 5th in the league, ranked 3rd against the rush, and they're 3rd against the pass, and they're 9th against the rush. So that is a defense, despite a ton of injuries, that's still really playing well. And we saw the Seahawks turn it over uncharacteristically. I don't think that's actually going to be a problem, but I do think the 49ers defense is going to play a role here. And again, kind of comparing to Steelers, Ravens, these games are close in the NFC West, as we saw on Sunday night between the Cards and the Seahawks. So 3 is something I'm comfortable with, but I'm still going to take the 49ers.
I'm going to take the Seahawks. And listen, if this was -6, I would be a bit worried, and that's what this line opened at. But at -3, this is very, very good value. I think, again, I'm using the test of it. We looked at this line a week ago or 2 weeks ago. How do we feel about it? And so I'm not going to be overly concerned about the small sample size of Seattle losing to what I think is a really good Cardinals team in prime time, in a close game. San Francisco, they're 4-3, but 3 of their wins came against, the 2 New York teams and the Patriots, who were coming off of, some real issues with COVID-19. And as we've mentioned, haven't been very good this year. So I'm going to take Seattle. And I think that 3, is a very, very comfortable number. There is no number where I will feel comfortable taking the Dallas Cowboys. I've said that before.
Yeah, you're right.
Pick them last week, half a point for Washington. Oh, come on. It's Washington. How could you go against the Cowboys? The Cowboys have so much more talent offensively. They got the break speed off them. Now the line is much bigger. 7.5 points against your Philadelphia Eagles. Everyone knows where I'm going. I'm going against the Cowboys, so I cede my time to you.
I am shocked, I have to say. I mean, I know you're not. I know you kind of have seen this coming, but I'm shocked by how bad this Cowboys team is. They have those injuries on offense. The offensive line, obviously the quarterback, and the quarterbacks now. But the defense is just so bad, and they're not injured. There's no excuses. I just don't get it. And with all that being said, I'm never picking the Cowboys again. I'm going to go with the Eagles. I think, they have their fair share of injuries, but they should be able to take advantage of the problems that the Cowboys have. I mean, I hope so. Given what we just saw from Washington, the fact that I'm an Eagles fan, if I don't see that, I'm going to be extremely concerned. But Ben DiNucci doesn't really concern me, and so I'll take the Eagles by 10. I would take them by 10 here.
Yeah, I as I said, I will not be picking the Cowboys for the foreseeable future in this space. So you can just chalk it up.
I gotta say, I am thoroughly enjoying this, by the way.
I'm sure you are. But listen, they're terribly run. They have terrible management and a terrible owner. They get what they deserve.
Yeah, that's what I like about it.
Yeah, fair enough. Tampa Bay is really well run. Evidently Tom Brady is still a high-level quarterback and a high-level GM, as he convinced Antonio Brown to add to the already ridiculous amount of talent they have on offense. You basically could put together a fantasy team just from their skill position players. The only problem is that they vulture each other, and you may not get a high on points. Not really sure why this game is in prime time. They're 10.5-point favorites going to the New York Giants. I know it's a big market, but this is clearly a game that wasn't able to be flexed because it would be much more interesting if Saquon Barkley was walking without crutches right now, but he isn't. 10.5 points, is that too many for you with Tampa Bay?
No. Tampa Bay has hit their stride. We've been talking about it for a few weeks that, it was going to take some time, and I think they're there. They're, if they're not the best team in the NFL, they're the second best team. The defense is terrorizing opponents. And Tom Brady, like you said, he's dropping dimes. They have countless options. It sounds like Chris Godwin's going to miss this game, but I don't think that really matters. They can run the ball. They can throw the ball. They can defend as well as anybody. And the Giants, they have one win, and they have one of the league's worst offenses. So I think Tampa wins this big.
Yeah, Godwin missing games just means that Mike Evans can go off because it seems like they can't have a big game at the same time. They take turns so far in that offense. But this line is 10.5. We had another big one in terms of a team that's a championship contender and a team that is going to be at the top of the draft from New York, and the Chiefs and the Jets, and that was 19.5. If you told me these two lines were flipped and that Tampa, who might be the most complete team in football, is 19.5-point favorites against the team where the play that we're all going to talk about at the end of the year for them is their quarterback falling on himself.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if Tampa was 19.5 over the Giants and the Chiefs were 10.5 over the Jets. So I say all that to say, yes, I'm in. I will take Tampa Bay 10.5 over the Giants. That's a game, if you haven't already picked them in Survivor, that many people are going to be on. Tampa Bay at the Giants. Who are you on? What is your Survivor pick this week? I'll get mine out of the way. I'm taking the Chiefs. And so that's the pick that I'm going to play this week. But where do you see some value?
Yeah, I thought about taking the Chiefs as well. Obviously, my strategy has been to follow the Jets around the country and take whoever they're playing. But this time, I'm going to take the Bucs. I think the Chiefs, the longer you go into Survivor, you want to have good teams available. And I think the Chiefs would be one that I'd take. If this Bucs-Giants game wasn't available, I'd go Chiefs. But this Bucs-Giants game is right there for the pick, and so I'm going to take the Bucs, and I think they handle the Giants pretty easily.
These are probably going to be famous last words. So
Don't say that.
Write the time code down. But I don't think either of us are going to be sweating out our Survivor picks this week, which is enjoyable, which is the way you want your Survivor picks to go. Hopefully you enjoyed this and you enjoy the games this weekend. Thanks so much for watching.